The wind blew gently across the wide plain, bringing with it the distant scent of wet earth and new leaves. The great ship, which had endured incessant rain for so long, now rested on a mound, imposing in its silence. The doors of the ark echoed with heavy creaks as they opened, and out came men, women, and many creatures, in pairs, full of hope for a new beginning. Among them was Cam, one of Noah's sons. His curious gaze scanned the horizon, still marked by the waters that had destroyed the ancient world, but now full of expectation for what was to come. Cam walked alongside his brothers, Shem and Japheth, absorbing every detail of this unfamiliar scene. He remembered how endless the storm had seemed and the fear in everyone's eyes as lightning flashed across the sky. But now, with the sun bathing everything in golden light, he felt that they had survived for something special. All around, animals followed their paths, finding shelter and starting new lives, as if creation had gained a new chapter. Noah, with his age and experience, led his family with tenderness and determination. His face showed the weariness of one who had fought for survival, but his eyes shone with deep gratitude. Soon, he called his children, and together they erected an altar of stones. There, they thanked the Creator for their salvation and asked for guidance for the future. It was a moment of reverence and humility, because everyone knew life would go on, but nothing would be the same as before. Cam felt the weight of being part of that new generation. As he helped his father work the land, preparing the soil for crops and planting, the responsibility of keeping alive the hope they had received grew within him. Often, his thoughts flew fast, restless, imagining what it would be like to build everything from scratch and what role he should play in the new era of humanity. After all, together with his brothers, he would be responsible for populating and transforming that vast world full of secrets. The days passed, marked by hard work, laughter, and a respite from the ashes of the past. Cam, impulsive and outspoken, sometimes found himself at odds with Noah, whose orders were firm and wise. One day, after hard work in the vineyard they had planted, Noah retired to rest and, without realizing it, ended up getting drunk on the freshly prepared wine. Cam, upon entering the tent and seeing his father in a moment of vulnerability, could not resist the urge to go out and tell his brothers what he had seen, mocking old Noah. Shem and Japheth, unlike him, listened attentively but decided to act with respect. They took a blanket, walking backwards so as not to see their father's nakedness, and covered Noah, taking care to preserve his dignity. When Noah awoke and learned what had happened, his heart was filled with sadness. He recognized the kindness of Shem and Japheth, but saw in Ham an attitude of disrespect at a time when everyone should have been cultivating love and understanding. That moment forever marked the life of Ham and his descendants. The lesson taught there was clear: it is not enough just to survive. We must honor and care for even those closest to us, especially in times of weakness. Those who understand the importance of respect plant seeds of blessing that blossom forever. But for Ham, the consequences would soon unfold, bringing more lessons about pride, responsibility, and how every gesture can shape the future. Silence hung heavy in the tent after that morning. Cam, restless, walked among the vines he had helped plant, feeling a mixture of anger, sadness, and shame inside him. He wondered if he would ever truly be understood by his father, if he would ever have a place to be heard and honored, just like his brothers. It was as if, with every misstep, all hope of recognition vanished like dew in the sun. The others, sensing Cam's distance, also felt the weight of the atmosphere between them. They searched for words of reconciliation, hoping that everyone could walk together again. Japh, quieter, worked hard, hoping that time would bring answers to the open wounds. Noah himself, still devastated by his son's attitude, spent long moments in prayer, asking for strength to guide his children in this new land in a just and wise manner. The days passed, and that wound remained, silent but alive. Cam tried to keep himself busy with increasingly distant tasks, preferring solitary work to the company of his brothers. He felt out of place, as if he didn't really belong anywhere. In the midst of all this, he began to observe the nature around him, seeing how animals followed their instincts, living according to their own rules. This made Cam reflect on the difference between acting simply on impulse and acting with wisdom and respect. One afternoon, seeing his father's face marked by the lines of time and suffering, Cam realized how much he had ignored the invisible scars that everyone around him carried. He remembered Noah's look when he found out what had happened. There was more than disappointment. There was pain for loving a son who also made mistakes, because only those who love deeply can feel the wounded soul. Little by little, Cam understood that in every relationship there are choices. It is possible to react with pride, hide behind excuses, or face one's own mistakes and ask for forgiveness. There, surrounded by the silence of the countryside and the weight of his own actions, Cam felt the need to change. He sought to reconnect with his brothers, shared in the harvest, and listened without interruption to what they had to say. The beginning was timid and difficult, but for the first time, Cam realized that humility does not diminish anyone. On the contrary, it is what allows for a true new beginning. Through held-back tears, his heart still heavy, he sought reconciliation with Noah, acknowledging his mistake and learning that respect and compassion are the foundation of every family and every new world built. The future was still uncertain, but at that moment, Cam experienced something new. Hope that, even in the face of consequences, it is always possible to plant new seeds and reap a new tomorrow. Time passed, and as the seasons changed, Cam struggled to find his place in this new world. His days were filled with work on the plantations, building shelters, and spending time with his family, but inside him, a silent conflict raged. Although he had sought reconciliation, he still felt the suspicious glances of some, as if they were waiting for him to fail again. This hurt him, but it also awakened in him the need to prove his worth, not only to his father, but to himself. Each dawn was a test of perseverance. One night, while everyone was asleep, Cam accidentally wandered off and heard voices coming from Shem and Japheth's tents. The day's fatigue weighed heavily on him, but Cam did not sleep. He preferred to watch the stars, searching for answers in the sky. What he sought was more than forgiveness. He wanted understanding. He felt that instead of simply being remembered for a mistake, he could be recognized for something good, something that would help his family, that would show that he had grown up. He held in his heart the desire to transform the pain of the past into learning. Amidst all this, rumors of disunity began to spread beyond his own home. Living together became more difficult with the arrival of new challenges, such as the division of fertile land and the emergence of different opinions about where to build, how to plant, and how to manage the responsibility received from the Creator. Cam, realizing the risk of rifts among his own descendants, was torn between following his impulses and betting on dialogue. More than once, he felt the urge to leave alone, to be free from the bonds of family, but he understood better each day that isolation would not bring peace, only emptiness. In this scenario, Cam realized that everyone was going through silent trials. Sem dealt with the burden of protecting the family's unity at all costs. Japh carried the responsibility of providing for the family and hoped for recognition through his work, almost without words. Noah, in turn, was seen as a symbol of guidance, but suffered as he tried to keep his children together, seeking the right path in the silence of prayer. The nights became spaces for reflection, where each member faced their own fears and regrets. The turning point was approaching. Cam knew that this time, asking for forgiveness wasn't enough. He had to take a step forward and show through his actions that he would choose the good of his family over his pride. Inside him, a seed of faith began to sprout. The real test was not only in his calloused hands, but in his heart, willing to forgive and seek new beginnings. As dawn broke, Cam felt he was facing the biggest choice of his life: perpetuate the cycle of resentment or start a new story marked by faith, trust, and, above all, the courage to start over. The wind blew strongly that morning, bringing a cold air that pierced the tents and heralded the arrival of new times. Cam awoke before the sun. His eyes, fixed on the horizon, conveyed a weariness beyond the body, a weight of someone who had already walked long distances within himself. Noah's words echoed in his mind: that family is a shelter, but also a challenge, that each child carries not only promises, but also the pains and marks of their ancestors. In recent days, the tension between the brothers had increased. After an argument about the most fertile land and how to plant it, Shem walked away, overcome by a silent fervor, while Japheth, even quieter, began to work harder than necessary, as if trying to fill the uncomfortable silence. Cam sensed the threat of a rupture in the air and knew that the responsibility for keeping the group together fell on everyone. But now there was a different strength within him, a nascent humility and a faith that rose, albeit delicately, amid the rubble of pride. That day, while working in the fields, a heavy storm suddenly broke out. The nearby river overflowed, threatening to wash away part of the harvest and destroy what they had built with so much sacrifice. Amid the chaos, shouting, and running, Cam was faced with a choice: protect his own shelter, as some suggested, or unite his brothers and neighbors to save as much as possible together. The old, selfish instinct pulsed strongly in his chest, but now something inside him resisted. He looked at his father, tense and tired, and felt the echo of a faith that called for sacrifice. Without hesitation, Cam ran toward his brothers, shouting for them to build barriers with logs and stones. He organized lines, listened to suggestions, and acted with determination and courage. The storm brought them together as it had not done in a long time, forcing each one to support the other, to trust and share responsibilities. The danger brought the opportunity for reconciliation. During those decisive minutes, Cam felt a new strength. He was no longer just the son marked by his mistake, but someone capable of leading, inspiring, and offering real hope. When the storm subsided, most of the harvest had been saved. No shelter was lost, and the exhausted group looked at each other with a mixture of relief and surprise. It was as if the storm had washed away old hurts and brought back the trust they seemed to have lost. Noah hugged his children, tears mixed with mud, and for the first time in a long time, Cam truly felt the warmth of home. Under the clearing sky and the strong smell of wet earth, he understood that maturity is forged not only by the forgiveness of others, but by the courage to act for the common good, even when it means facing one's own shadow. Now, with a renewed spirit, Cam knew that when faced with new obstacles, he would choose faith, not loneliness. In the dark of night, when the wind had died down and only the rustling of leaves broken by the storm remained in the air, Cam couldn't sleep. The silence was profound, but within him, a greater storm was brewing. He looked up at the makeshift ceiling of the shelter, saw the faint lights of the stars through the cracks, and felt his heart uneasy, as if a presence was watching him, pulling him out of the tent. Outside, the still damp earth gave off a strong, almost bitter smell. Cam walked to the riverbank, where the world seemed suspended between sleep and awakening. Noah's words about the need for renewal echoed loudly. He was not alone. In the distance, Shem prayed silently on his knees, and Japheth helped Noah gather some belongings. His father, exhausted, looked like someone waiting for signs of hope. The darkness was thick, but at that moment, like a whisper coming from the earth itself, Cam felt an uncontrollable urge to cry out to the Creator, not for material salvation, but for understanding and transformation. He sank his feet into the cold mud, raised his hands, and let the tears flow freely, mixing with the water and sweat of the hard days he had lived. He did not ask for relief, but for strength to understand his role in the new beginning of the world. He felt that, through the gaze of deeply shaken nature, through the marks of the storm and the silent wounds between his brothers, something greater was forming. At the height of that clamor, a strange glow danced on the surface of the river, as if a fire had fallen from the sky without burning the shore, only gently illuminating it. The reflection of that light was clear, intense, and reassuring. Sem and Japheth, sensing the luminous presence, approached in silence. Noah, his voice trembling, raised his hands to the heavens and exclaimed words of recognition for the miracle that was unfolding before them. There, they were no longer just survivors of a tragedy, but part of a living promise, renewed by the gesture of forgiveness between them and the recognition of their imperfections. Cam felt the barriers of the past crumble, not only between him and his brothers, but within his own heart. An unprecedented peace invaded him, replacing the shadow of resentment with a deep warmth, a certainty that he was finally accepted. The miracle did not just change the landscape, it transformed the souls of those men. It replaced fear with hope, pride with humility, and loneliness with unbreakable bonds of faith. Upon returning to the shelter, Cam found Sem and Japheth sitting around a small fire, sharing silence and gratitude. He sat down beside them, and together they contemplated the dawn, knowing that together, they were reborn as brothers and children of the same promise. A thin mist covered the meadow as the first rays of sun streaked across the sky, painting the leaves and the calm river water gold. Tiredness weighed heavily on everyone's bodies, but a light peace spread among the tents. Still, Cam felt a new weight in his heart, as if the miracle of the previous night was also a calling. Upon awakening, he followed his instinct and walked to where Noah stood silently watching the horizon. The old patriarch seemed smaller, consumed by the years and responsibilities, but his gaze was steady, filled with a serene faith. Noah placed his hands on his son's shoulders, and they both remained silent, listening to the distant singing of birds. Cam felt his father's hands, rough but warm. Suddenly, the wind blew harder and brought with it a sweet smell, different from the usual. A sense of divine presence filled the space. Noah closed his eyes and, in a soft voice, began to recite prayers of gratitude and surrender. Cam knelt beside him, feeling the damp ground beneath his legs. Time seemed to stand still. As they prayed, sunlight pierced the mist and enveloped them in a warm glow, as if invisible hands were welcoming them. Cam felt something change in his chest. His guilt was carried away by the wind, his fear dissolved like mist. For the first time, he understood the invisible workings of God, who shaped not only the paths of men, but also their hearts. The miracle was not just an event to be admired, but a force that propelled him forward, even when certainties failed. At that moment, Cam understood that he needed to choose faith, not just wait for results. It was time to make a commitment, to abandon resentment once and for all, to embrace reconciliation not as temporary relief, but as a mission for each new day. Standing up, he looked at his father and, with a simple but firm gesture, sealed his decision. He would be a pillar for his family, someone who carries forgiveness as a shield and hope as a light. Beside them, Sem and Japheth approached, also touched by that sacred atmosphere. United, they raised a prayer together, no longer fearful or insecure, but certain that, despite the shadows, God's action was present, invisible as the wind, transformative as the unexpected dawn. Faith propelled them to the work of the new day, this time sustained not only by blood ties, but by a renewed and chosen trust. The sun was already high when Cam rose from his morning prayer beside Noah, feeling an unfamiliar lightness on his shoulders. The scent of wet earth and freshly baked bread mingled with fresh hay, bringing back memories of other times before the flood. The camp was bustling with activity. Sem directed the servants in the fields, while Jafe tended to the animals furthest from the river. The daily tasks went on, but something had changed. In the looks, there was respect, cooperation, a truce in the silent conflicts. However, Cam knew that complete reconciliation required more than good intentions. The miracle and forgiveness received showed a new path, but putting the heart into practice was a matter of daily choice. That morning, Cabra, the group's main source of milk, ran away from the pasture and got lost among the hillsides. Cam felt the weight of responsibility. Everyone depended on that herd. Without hesitation, he grabbed a staff and set off alone in search of the animal. He climbed slippery slopes, crossed boulders, and for the first time, he did not feel afraid of getting lost. In the silence of the forest, images of life before the ark and the mistake he had made came back to him. But now, instead of shame, he felt gratitude for what he had learned and for the forgiveness he had been offered. The more he searched for the goat, the more he understood that his mistake did not define him, but rather his desire to make amends. When he reached an old oak tree, he saw the animal trapped and panting desperately. Crouching down beside it, he spoke softly, reassuring it. Patiently, he freed the goat's legs and calmed it down. The simple gesture seemed to reflect his own experience. He himself had been trapped in grief, and the Creator's patient care had freed him to a new life. As he led the animal back to camp, his heart felt full, certain that everything he had experienced, whether pain or struggle, had served to shape him and strengthen his faith. Upon his return, he was greeted by Shem and Japheth, who embraced him without reservation, and by Noah, whose eyes were filled with pride and peace. Through held-back tears, Cam finally understood that the purpose of all the trials was to teach them to start over, not by forgetting the past, but sustained by the power of forgiveness and restorative love. That morning became the culmination of his journey, the moment when, understanding the meaning of everything, he felt that he was truly ready to live the promised new beginning. Since returning to camp, Cam saw life in a new light. Noah's face, once weighed down by responsibility, now showed traces of quiet contentment. Sem, closer than ever, told old stories as he organized the day's work. Jafe, once quiet and suspicious, smiled and entrusted him with important tasks. Cam felt part of the whole, recognizing in the small gestures the deep healing that was taking place not only within himself, but among everyone. The cycle of the seasons became an ally. The seeds sown in the days of tension soon germinated, transforming arid soils into green and promising fields. The abundant harvest was shared in harmony, and a new routine was organized, this time more just and cooperative. The children played among the tents, their laughter intertwining hopes in the wind. On a quiet afternoon, Cam decided to build a wooden bench for his family next to the oak tree where he had found the lost goat. He worked in silence while listening to the sounds of the camp, feeling lighthearted. When he finished, he called Noah, Shem, Japheth, and all the members of the family, inviting them to sit together. There, in the shade of the big tree, Cam spoke humbly. He acknowledged his mistakes and thanked them for the love and patience that had rescued him. He said he had learned that no wound is eternal, that forgiveness is a source of strength and a new beginning. Noah embraced him, saying that true victories are born of repentance and the desire to repair what has been broken. Shem and Japheth, moved, reaffirmed the bond of brotherhood that nothing could break. The group joined hands in a spontaneous prayer, giving thanks for their new life and the lessons they had learned. The sun crossed the horizon, bathing the scene in golden light, illuminating faces marked by the struggles of a new beginning and also by the joy of small and great victories. Cam, gazing at his reunited family, understood the value of cycles, of falls and rises. It was clear that nothing had been in vain. The pain had prepared the ground for the harvest of love. And at that moment, everyone knew, in peace, that the Creator's promises were alive among them. Night fell silently and warmly over the camp, spreading a soft light among the tents and the newly harvested fields. Cam sat alone on the bench under the oak tree, his heart pounding with anticipation, as if he sensed that something extraordinary was about to happen. The stars began to appear, dotting the black sky, and the family conversations gave way to a reverent silence. With the wind carrying a sweet scent, Sem and Japheth approached and sat down beside their brother, while Noah arrived slowly, leaning on his staff with steady steps. Everyone remained like this, united, in silence, listening to the soft rustling of the leaves and the murmur of the river in the distance. Suddenly, a different light appeared on the horizon. It was not moonlight, nor the fire of torches, but a soft, golden, living glow that grew slowly, as if a heavenly flame were being blown over the earth. The children ran out of their shelters, attracted by the strange light, and soon the entire camp gathered before this phenomenon. The glow expanded, dancing over the fields and running along the river's edge, until it formed a translucent arch, like a bridge connecting heaven and earth. Over this arch hung such an intense peace that no one dared to speak. Noah, moved, fell to his knees in the grass and raised his hands, giving thanks without words. The miracle grew when, suddenly, bright drops of dew began to fall, illuminated by the arch, watering the crops while everyone watched, perplexed, at the sudden resurrection of the first flowers. What had been barren soil became a garden in an instant. Ham felt a wave of warmth wash over him. He remembered the dark hours of guilt, the loneliness punctuated by doubts, the tears, and the fear. Now, however, these memories dissolved in the face of the present miracle, for he saw himself renewed, part of the living promise made to his family. Sem and Japheth embraced each other, and Cam joined them, feeling that they all belonged to that sacred moment. Noah, looking at his son, showed in his eyes not only pride and forgiveness, but also recognition of the purpose fulfilled. At that climax, the faith that had sustained the small group through so many trials proved to be fully rewarded. The light faded, but remained etched in the spirit of each one. The silence, however, was not empty, it was fullness. There, under the oak tree and the arch of rare brightness, all distances disappeared. Cam finally understood that the true miracle was not only the flowery garden, but the transformation of hearts, the reconciliation of the soul with the past, the quiet certainty that love can blossom even after the flood. Time followed its course after the night of the miracle, and the camp awoke, bathed in serenity. The now green fields continued to bloom, but there was something more fertile than the earth: the hearts, intertwined by the sacred experience. Cam walked among the tents with a different posture, no longer the son marked by error, but a reconciled man, able to look each face in the eye without a shadow of shame. Mutual respect, which had once seemed like an effort, now flowed naturally. Every gesture, every word, every embrace carried the echo of the forgiveness they had experienced. Noah, once worried about his children's future, now saw them working together, without the mistrust that had separated them. Shem and Japheth prayed together every morning, giving thanks not only for their food, but for the courage their hearts had found in choosing to love instead of judge. The children grew up hearing stories about those days, not of pain, but of resilience, and learned early on that scars do not prevent the harvest. They only remind us of the rains that preceded it. One night, gathered again under the oak tree, Noah asked for silence. With a steady voice, he said that the true legacy of a family is not written only with deeds, but with humility to recognize one's own faults and the greatness of forgiveness. He told them that the Creator's promise was fulfilled not only on the renewed earth, but within each one of them, sealing a cycle of unshakable trust between father and children. Cam, standing beside his brothers, felt a peace in his heart he had never known before. He understood then that the greatest victory was a new beginning, a transformed heart that no longer fears falling because it has learned to rise again. The wind rustled the oak tree's leaves, carrying through the camp the certainty that every journey has pain, but only flourishes with courage, faith, and surrender. Thus, Noah's clan continued on, certain that nothing can stop redeeming love when it is truly embraced. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like it, comment on what you thought, and subscribe to the channel for more touching stories like this one.